This podcast is made possible through donations from listeners like you and our partners at Tall Man Equipment, where they pride themselves on equipping their customers with the tools they need to get the job done right. They are dedicated to set the standard for quality, convenience, and reliability. At Tall Man, your opinion is important to them. Rate and review any product or tool you've used on their new website at tallmanequipment.com. Line 11 Clothing Company, making apparel for our first responders with a positive message to patriots that you can be proud of. A proceed of the cost goes to helping our foundation ignite the fire for father engagement. Give them a follow at Line 11 Clothing on Instagram. And last but not least, Monzingo Knives. Each knife is created with craftsmanship that only a tradesman could provide. Find them on Instagram at Monzingo Knives and get your American-made Monzingo knife today. Welcome to the Show Up Dad. This is a podcast created for hardworking fathers. At the Show Up Dad, we recognize that fathers providing for their children is certainly important. But when men truly understand their unique role and gain the knowledge and skills to be great fathers, they can transform and impact future generations. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Gianna Simone. She is an exemplary role model, overcoming great obstacles from her past. Gianna found great strength in acting. She has had great success in Hollywood movies such as Star Trek Into Darkness, I Can Only Imagine, Gary Marshall's Mother's Day, and The Unbroken Path to Redemption. Her life goal is to bring hope and positive change to abused and neglected individuals all around the world. Gianna is also the producer and host of the Amazon Prime show Love Gianna, where she interviews the world's top plant-based physicians and athletes. Welcome to the Show Up, Gianna.
I'm so glad to be here with you. Thank you so much. Hello to all of the viewers.
Well, thank you once again
for the listeners.
Right. It's so awesome to have you on here, Gianna. And I just want to open up with you telling us about your childhood, as you remember it, if you don't mind.
Yes. So, I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, and around 13 years old, I was put into the foster care system. And I was physically and emotionally abused in my home growing up. And I will preface this, as I do every single time I tell my story or dive into my story, that I tell my story to inspire people and encourage people, and also to not shame the people who did hurt me, because I believe that everybody is worthy of grace and forgiveness, because we all have messed up in a certain area. And people who have hurt me, yes, they messed up in a certain area, but they all deserve a second chance, whether they have stepped into it yet or not. I always believe, because I follow a God of forgiveness and a great loving God, that there's that for everybody, not only for me or for other people that have chosen to accept forgiveness. And because we're all sinners, we all mess up. Mm-hmm. And so I always want to preface my story with that I don't do this to shame anybody, that there is always hope and grace. And I do have a lot of forgiveness in my heart for people who have seriously hurt me. So with that said, I grew up in foster care from 13 until I aged out until about 18. And I bounced around from home to home, and it was right around my 13th birthday. And so, things at home were always very, very hectic and very physically violent. And there was neglect and emotional abuse and just a person who didn't know how to deal with emotions because of trauma and pain and victimhood. And I have to tell the truth, right? Like we can only tell the facts. And I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to shame anybody, but it is what happened. And it needs to be talked about to help people, to inspire people who may be going through the same thing and looking for tools like, how did she come out of this? How can I come out of this? Mm-hmm. And did she do something effective that helped her? And yes, I did. And so, there was, some obviously physical and emotional abuse, like I said, and I had a chins taken out on me, and a chins stands for child in need of service.
Mhm.
And at this point, I was going to one of the best schools in Boston, where you have to test to get into, and you have to maintain a certain, you know, academic level of achievement, and you have to be, your attendance has to be good, and you have to be bright to get into these schools. And so I got into one of them, and I was getting straight A's, and there was still this chins taken out of me, and I'm like, wait, I'm going to school every day. I would be punished with this, my parent not taking me to school as a punishment. And still I was doing all this. I was being abused, and life was just so hectic, and I was still, putting my mind towards something positive, and I wasn't letting life eat me up. I was
Mhm.
actually turning the negative things that were happening into positive things, and focus. But still, there were still actions being taken towards me, where I was being abused, but yet being called the abuser, so to
Mm.
speak, because of this child in need of service that was taken out on me. So you get a probation officer assigned to you when this is taken out on you. And the probation officer would meet with me. I don't know. I forget. It was like once a week or something like that, or once every couple of weeks. And she said, Gianna, you're getting straight A's in school. You're not in trouble at all. It seems that you're not the issue. And can you tell me what's going on at home? Like, why was this even brought to this point?
Mhm.
And I told her the truth. I told her what was going on. And she said, we have to take you out of your home.
Mhm.
So this was the first time in my life that somebody had really gone to bat for me and spoke up against the injustice that I was experiencing. And it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders.
Mhm.
And so, but I went from one hell to another, and the foster care system was not pleasant, to say the least, in Boston. Now there may be situations where it is pleasant with some families, and that's beautiful, and we need to encourage that. But this situation was not pleasant. I was jumped around from home to home, and it landed in a girls' home where multiple girls would come in and out, and it was really, really, really painful and hard. And I was filled with rage for a really long time,
Mhm.
until I became a Christian. And so, I know we have a bunch of questions, so I guess I'll stop there with this one. But
Mhm.
that's pretty much in the summary of my childhood.
Wow. No, thank you once again for just opening up and sharing that. I mean, it's just horrendous to hear such a story like that, of abuse, of neglect. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, were these your foster parents that were abusing you, or was it the children at the orphanage, or
No. So that's actually a really good question, because some people think that foster care is an orphanage, but they're two different things. So the foster
okay.
care system is for people, for children who are in like abusive situations, or maybe have alcoholics or drug addicts for parents, and they somehow somebody knows this. They call the departments of social services or child protective services, and then you get assigned a caseworker, and then that caseworker investigates, comes over the house and investigates, and decides to bring this before a judge and say, these children, this parent is unfit, or these parents are unfit to take care of this children. This is a bad situation. We need to get these children out to protect them. And it is a temporary situation. They always give the parent opportunities, unless the parent's in jail, of course,
Mhm.
opportunities to clean up their life and get their children back. And so, speaking of that, we would go to court every couple of months, and there was this, I was working out at this gym to become physically and mentally tough, because I was so fed up with what was going on at home, and
Mhm.
I needed to fight back. That the gym owner started asking me questions. Her name was Kathy DeMarco. She started asking me questions, and I told her the truth, and she's like, where are your parents? They're not coming to get you, and like, what's the deal? So she decided to go through the process to adopt me. And she would come to court every couple of months. And my mother would say that she didn't want me, and Kathy would say that she did want me.
Mm.
And so that was also amazing. And I'm happy to tell you about Kathy. I speak about her all the time because she's such an impactful force in my life. She's no longer with us. She's in heaven.
Mhm.
But so to answer your question, that's the difference between an orphanage and foster care.
Mhm. I don't know if you know about our story, but I worked on the road. Okay. I'm a journeyman lineman by trade, and I would travel all around the country restoring power,
Hmm.
sometimes in different states and stuff like that. So I left my wife with three kids at the house, with a farm, with over 300 chickens, 5 dogs, 4 cats, you name it.
Hmm.
And she would have to take care of all of that. And I
Mm,
and I remember there are certain times that I would leave like the night before I was going to leave to go out for, 2, 3 weeks at a time, 4 weeks at a time. And my son would break his leg, or
mm,
one of the kids would come down with a bad cold, or, something like that would happen. So now she's stuck not only taking care of the home, but also taking care of that child. And she never had no break. And
mm.
and I remember her calling me and just totally being at her wit's end, just telling me, "You need to come home. I can't deal with this anymore. This is I don't feel right. I'm being upset with the children and just all this different stuff." So I sympathize. One of the things we can do, okay, and I always tell people, in order to understand a person and really listen to them, you got to empathize with them. And that means putting yourself in their shoes.
Right.
So, me listening to your story about your mom and just putting myself in her shoes and what she was going through as a single mother and stuff like that, and just seeing that in retrospect to my own wife and what she had to go basically as a single mother while I was out of town, it's hard.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
absolutely hard,
Yeah.
and once again, we're not here to shame no one. Um,
Right.
I'm just here to just sympathize and empathize with what your mom was going through. I can't even imagine 2 kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh
And for children who are abused, there is no excuse, no
no.
matter what somebody goes through or what somebody is going through, no matter how horrible it is and how much we can empathize and how much forgiveness there is.
Mhm.
It's C.S. Lewis says forgiveness does not mean excusing. It's not, there's no excuses to hurt any human being on this planet. Now, I understand if a life is threatened, obviously you have to protect and defend yourself, but
Mhm.
we were children. I was
Yeah.
an innocent child, and there really is. I always tell people you can always get yourself out of an abusive situation, whether
Mhm.
you are an adult, a male or a female, or a child, and you can always get yourself out of an abusive situation. And there is forgiveness, but there are no excuses. We
Mhm.
don't have to. We can empathize with them and forgive them, but we do not have to accept abuse or injustice of any kind. And there's always a way out. God
Mhm.
always gives us a way out to protect ourselves, to save us. And 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 I did that ultimately. I told the truth, and I got myself out of a bad situation, and
Mhm.
a really abusive situation. And it was honestly one of the best things to do as a child, because it taught me so much as an adult that I do not have to put up with abuse.
Mhm.
And and so, yeah, I always want to, send that message out, that there's always a way to get yourself out. You can say no. I do not have to endure physical, emotional, or psychological abuse in any setting.
And I agree with you 100%. No one deserves to be put through that kind of trauma. What were your earliest memories of your father? And can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yes. So my dad is one of my best friends, and we
Mhm.
have an interesting r- relationship. It's kind of on again, off again. And he and my mom were divorced before I could even remember. And they were just two individuals that should probably have never gotten together, but I'm grateful they did, because my brother and I are here. So
Mhm.
I I think, obviously, like my dad does the best that he can do. My dad never physically abused us, and he really, I see my dad's heart. I see my dad. He did not have My dad actually has an incredible story. He was very badly abused growing up as well, and he
Mhm.
did not have a dad around. And so he had two other brothers and one sister. And he sort of grew up on the streets as well, and he went to jail as a young kid because he wouldn't rat on somebody that committed a crime, blamed it on my dad, and my dad wouldn't rat, so he had to go to prison. Now he didn't have he graduated from the 8th grade, and he didn't have a high school education. He got out of
Mhm.
jail and went to Harvard
Wow.
without a high school education. And so, I mean, like, what, at an 8th grade education, you get into Harvard? Imagine if my dad did go to high school. Imagine if my dad did have caring, loving, amazing parents. I mean, so I see my dad's life and what he was given and how he played his hand. And
Mhm.
he did it so well. Now, obviously we all struggle with something. We all do. And it's our job. It's okay if things happen to us, but it's not okay if we don't fix what has happened to us, or at least attempt to, and then continue the pain and continue hurting other people. That's where it's not okay. That's where
Mhm.
trauma can get us in trouble. So so I'd say I have a great relationship with my dad, except when it's not. And those times are few and far between. But when we are speaking and getting along, he is my best friend. And
Mm.
I think we, you know how girls marry, or women, girls grow up to be women and then they marry somebody like their dad, and then vice versa. Like, young
Mhm.
boys will grow up to be men and marry people like their mom. And I think that's what happened with my dad. I think he married somebody similar to his mom, and then we went through similar things. We were both abused, and so we both know where the other is coming from, and we can relate to each other a lot. I relate
Mhm.
to my dad a lot. And so some of my first memories of him were visitation. Sometimes we had to have supervised visitation, and my mom would drop us off at restaurants or public places, and because they did not get along. And
Mm.
but I remember loving him so much and feeling how much he loved me. Like, he really, really loves my brother and I. And and even though we're imperfect human beings, I can still feel his love. Like, I can feel that he wants to do the right thing,
Mhm.
but he does it with the tools in his toolbox that
Yeah.
he's been given, or he's attempted to learn and gather those tools. So some of my first memories of him were just that, meeting him at these places and going on adventures and flying kites. And he got us this cool four-wheeler. And we were just talking the other day about Christmas and how he had all these presents wrapped for us, and he was playing a song when my brother and I walked in, and he got me this life-size Barbie doll. And the first thing I did was take the clothes off the life-size Barbie doll and put them on me. And I just
Hmm.
remember how magical he made things. And he didn't have a lot, and neither did my mom. And I wasn't on an airplane until I was 21, and I went skydiving. So, like, we never
Wow.
traveled, and we never took vacations, and my mom and my dad were always fighting. And I was being abused at home. So I remember missing him a lot. I remember
Mhm.
thinking, like, I wish I had a protector. I wish somebody could protect me against what's happening here. And and so those are some of my first memories, like
Mhm.
a lot of tears, some fear, a lot of joy, a lot of awe. Like, oh wow, it's dad, and oh, I miss dad, and I wish dad was here. So yeah, those are
Mhm.
some of them.
And so it sounds like when your father was there, it was amazing, right? He was
Yeah.
very intentional with you,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
that's amazing to hear. It also seems too that you had that longing, when he was gone. It was like, man, I wish daddy was here. If daddy was here, things would be better, right?
Yeah, or they could have been worse too, because
Mhm.
daddy and mommy did not get along, and they actually had hate for each other,
Mm.
which could have been dangerous. Maybe maybe it was a blessing in disguise, that it could have been worse. Maybe it would have been worse.
And how did that affect you with, the parents just fighting in front of the children and stuff like that?
I think I didn't, even with the abuse that was going on at home, I just thought everybody goes through this. This is just
Mm.
life. Like, I didn't know anybody else's experience.
Mhm.
And so how did it affect me? I guess it just was what it was, like the
Mhm.
sky is blue. Like I didn't have a choice,
Mhm.
and in what was dealt. But I had a choice when I got older to realize, oh, well, my friend's mommy and daddy doesn't act like this, or their parents don't treat them like this. Okay, well, this feels bad. I always knew that, and in some internal like compass, that this is not, we have good and bad, this doesn't feel good. It always felt bad. Obviously it doesn't feel good
Mhm.
to be physically abused or emotionally abused, or to experience this anger that my parents had towards us as kids and towards each other. And so I guess I knew that something was made me feel bad,
Mhm.
but it was life. It just was what it was. And
Mm.
I would try to do things to self-soothe, like I guess I would go play or watch television, or I would always like work out and be physical, and I would act too. I would like put on plays and stuff, and um, build forts and like it just, you do what
Yeah.
you can do with what you've been given, and I did just that. And then when I really got older and understood, then I started to fight back. And then
Mm.
after that, after I was taken out of this bad situation, then I kept trying to improve. And I think I wouldn't change a single thing, because it has shaped me into a person who loves Jesus, who
Mhm.
depends on Jesus, and who is I'm really recalcitrant. I'm really I have this like, okay, it knocked me down, but I'm going to get back up because I'm strong. I've been through this. Like I was on set of Star Trek Into Darkness, and I had to say my lines, and I was so nervous, and I was in front of everybody, and all these actors and the crew and the director J.J. Abrams, and I was like, okay, it's time to show up and be great. And
Mhm.
I was so nervous, and I was like, wait, Gianna, like I had an inner dialogue happening. I was like, you've been through hell and back.
Mhm.
This is nothing compared to that. This is a walk in the park. Calm yourself down and have fun.
Mm.
And so it really gives me that reality check of like this, where most people would be like, man, how do I deal with this? What do I do? It's not that serious to me.
Mhm.
And so I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for everything that I've had to walk through,
Mhm.
because most things are, doesn't mean everything is. There are challenges, and I break down and cry and freak out sometimes, but I know who to go to now. I know that I can't go to anybody but Jesus.
Mhm.
And Jesus does send us people. God does put people in our path to help us. But things like, I have this inner strength and connection to God that I don't think I would have had if I didn't go through what I went through.
Mhm. And I think it's interesting that you said that you could look back through all that pain and that struggle that you went through, and instead of looking at it as a victim, you used it as motivation. Um,
Yep.
I have a similar story like that too. Me myself, I grew up in a very strict home. I watched my father. He was very abusive with my mom, with us. And I love my dad just like you. You know what I mean? And I agree with you 100% when you said that our parents can only give us what they received,
Right.
right? So he was abused himself, and
Mhm.
that's how he interacted with us. But I remember thinking too, when I was in the military and I was going through Hell Week, and I remember thinking to myself, man, there's no way these guys are going to break me. I've already been through hell too. So I thought that was kind of interesting that you said that to yourself too, and you had that positive inner self talk to get you through those tough times instead of looking at it as a victim. I thought that was
Right.
interesting.
Thank you.
Uh, that leads me to my next question, Gianna.
Yes.
You talked about acting and stuff like that. How did your father have an influence on acting? Like, what made you choose that?
So he had a major impact, and he still does on my dreams. It's actually quite emotional, because I don't know if I, oh man, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It brings me to tears. Belief is so powerful. It's so powerful when we have the
Mm.
opportunity to believe in another human being. Do it.
Mm.
Encourage them. And it's, forgive me for I didn't.
No, take your time.
So, um, I was 16 at this point, and in foster care, my dad would always come and pick me up, and we would go for walks, or he would pick me up and drive me to school some days. And there were days where I had to take like 2 or 3 buses to get to school, and then some days I would skip school because I didn't want to do that and wake up at like dawn and take all these buses and be there by myself. So, plus I was walking through foster care.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we were together, and maybe I was a little younger. Maybe I was like 14 or 15. And I said, Dad, I really have this desire to model. And it's coming from this place in my stomach where like, it's this physical feeling, and it comes up through my chest, and it's this it was the strongest desire I've ever felt in my life to this day, and I still feel it. And I said, Dad, it's my purpose. I'm supposed to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm overwhelmed by how strong this feeling is. What do I do? And so he had the opportunity to either believe in me or
Mm-hmm.
brush it off and tell me, well, just stay in school. Just do this. Just do what I think you should do.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of doing that, my dad was intelligent and empathetic enough to say, okay, I can tell that you really have a calling to this. Let's call the New England School of Photography and let's find you a photographer. It didn't matter how crazy the idea was. My dad would always support me.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that crazy. I mean, maybe, I guess it's a matter of opinion, but so we called the New England School of Photography. I did a bunch of research, and I found a couple of photographers that I really liked. And he gave me $1,000 to get my first portfolio done. And I'm still friends with the photographer that shot my first portfolio. Her name is Shannon Michelle. She's one of my very best friends, and she will be a bridesmaid in my wedding. And so he breathed life into my dream. And when I was on set and I was modeling and taking on, like, even the photographer said, Gianna, you have a gift. You're able to turn it on and off in front of the camera, and you need to really pursue this. And I knew even before she told me that. And it's beautiful that she encouraged me that way. I knew that this was the path that I had to take in my life. And so, fast forward a little bit, I moved out to California at 21.
Mm-hmm.
Right after I went on my first plane that I went skydiving, and then went on a flight to California. No, actually, I'm sorry. We took a flight. My dad loves scratch tickets. He scratched a scratch ticket and won an all-inclusive trip for 2 to Vegas. So then we went to Vegas, and then after Vegas, I drove across the country
Oh,
and moved to
wow.
California. So, and then I got here, and I hustled. I really focused, and I became very successful in modeling in Boston, and then I knew I had to go to New York or LA. So then I moved to LA, and he moved out to Los Angeles
Mm-hmm.
about a year after I moved out, and he really continues to breathe life into me. And I had this opportunity. I'll finish the answer to this question on this. I had this opportunity. I was modeling a lot, and I was doing what's called fit modeling.
Mm-hmm.
And you work for designers, and it was a really, really good job, and it was providing a lot of financial freedom for me. And so this opportunity came up to where I auditioned for this role, and they needed me for like I think it was about 2 months, give or take, on set. And it was actually for Star Trek. And I said, Dad, I don't know. This was at the beginning of it. I don't know if I can commit to this because I may lose my fit modeling job because they need me a couple of times a week. What am I going to do? And he said to me, Gianna, do you want to be a model for the rest of your life, and a fit model at that? Or do you want to be an actress?
Hmm.
And I was like, it's a no-brainer. I
Yeah.
am now called to acting. So my passion for modeling turned into my passion for acting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole story in and of itself. But he really guided me to, what do you want? You
Mm-hmm.
can have what you want. And our Heavenly Father tells us that too. You can have what you want. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours.
Hmm. And I love that picture that you painted right there, because as fathers, and for all the fathers that are listening to this and mothers, our job as fathers is to help guide our children into their calling. I think a lot of times and I see this all the time with other dads, if you're a lineman, they're going to be linemen too, or, if I'm a mailman or whatever, plumber, whatever, my kids are going to be that too. And a lot of times we put these pressures on these children that's not really what they want to do. Instead of listening to them, seeing what their gift was, like your father did with you, and then helping to develop that gift. I think that's one of the greatest things we can give our children. Instead of telling them, hey, you can be this, you can be this, you can be this. Well, let's see what your gift is. Let's see what your calling is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have settled for jobs that they never were supposed to take because why? Life happened, now all of a sudden they have a family. Now they got to support that family. And then they get into these jobs. And what does job stand for? Just over broke. And now they're miserable going to a 40-hour week job, to a job that they absolutely hate. And they dread waking up every day.
It's so sad.
And it's sad because they're living in this nightmare, right? Just getting by. It's killing them. They literally are dying. These dads are literally dying internally. And then they take it out on their families, the ones that are closest to them.
Yeah.
And it's sad, but I kind of went on a tangent there, but
it's okay. I've been doing it too.
I just try to tie it in with your dad and giving your dad props, because I mean, that's amazing that he was able to see your gifts and talents and not just tell you, hey, you're going to do this, but hey, let's see what you want to do. Let's follow your dreams, your desires. And I want to support you,
Yes. I think my dad is a mixture of this is one of the greatest pieces of advice that I've heard. There's 3 people in a group, a doer, a talker, and a dreamer. And whether you're all 3 or you're in a marriage where it's equally balanced and one's the talker and the doer, or one's the dreamer and the doer, or there's a friendship or a business partnership where there's a talker, a dreamer, and a doer. And I think my dad is the perfect balance between the dreamer and the doer. And he taught me how to do your dream, put your dream into action, and belief is one of the major components.
No, that's amazing that he was able to just instill that with you, even just with the limited time that he had with you. You know what I mean? He had such a big impact on you that stayed with you, and you carried that into your life, into your career. And that's amazing as a father. I mean, give him a pat on the back. I mean, because that's a good
seriously
dad, you know what I mean?
Seriously. Yeah. And I see that in him.
I wanted to ask you, okay, so your passion is for plant-based diet. Where did that come from, if you don't mind me asking?
Yes, I love talking about this, and it's because it's a big issue and it needs to be talked about. So heart disease is the number 1 killer of men and women.
Yes.
I should say abortion is the number 1 killer. However, if we're talking about men and women, heart disease is, and it falls in line after abortion. And so heart disease is a foodborne illness. It need not exist. And if it does exist, it need not progress. And I, not only does it prevent and reverse the number 1 killer of men and women, to eat a plant-based diet, a whole food plant-based diet has been proven. It is the only diet, not a keto diet, not a paleo diet, not a low carb diet, not a Atkins diet. No diet has been proven to prevent and reverse the number 1 killer of men and women. And that is powerful information. Not only does it prevent and reverse the number 1 killer, it also can reverse type 2 diabetes. It can reverse psoriasis, acne, many ailments, even in some cases cancer. And so I'm like, man, this is powerful information. I did a deep dive, and I watched documentaries like Forks Over Knives, What the Health, Earthlings, Cowspiracy, and I just wanted to know the truth. Just like being a Christian, we have this moral compass. Like for being a Christian in my life and my journey there, I just wanted to know the truth. I want to know the truth. And Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Yes.
And so I wanted to know the truth about food, and I didn't want to be lied to anymore. I was anorexic. I starved myself. I was bulimic. I was throwing up. I was over exercising because I was a model for a really long time. And I thought that
Mhm.
was the only way to be skinny, was to over exercise, burn more calories in than you have out, over exercise, go to bed hungry. I would scroll on Instagram and look at pictures of food because my brain was so hungry, starving myself. I was hurting my body because I had a need. I had a need. It's okay to have needs. You have a need as a man. You want to be strong. You want to be athletic. You want to run long distances. You want to protect your wife and your children, your family. That's a need. That's a great need. I had a need because I had a calling. I had a need to be thin. I had a need that I wanted to meet so bad and so much
Mhm.
that I was hurting myself. And I was like, man, there has to be another way where I can meet this need but love myself. But I didn't
Mhm.
know. I didn't know. And I think that goes for men too. There is a way to meet all of your needs. God provides everything. We can do all things through Christ, not some things on Monday and Tuesday. We can do all things through Christ. So there is a way to meet our needs in loving ourselves and loving
Mhm.
others. There's always a way to do that. So I found out about a whole food plant-based diet and I adopted it. I did all this research and I was like, man, I have to get this information out to people. This is seriously powerful. And this can change lives. This can restore mental health. It has been proven to restore mental health, to fight depression. I mean, it's incredible. And it's been proven to prevent and reverse the number one killer. So I was like, I have to, in between my acting jobs and doing films,
Mhm.
I have to create a show. And so I created a show and eventually got picked up by Amazon. It was on YouTube at first. I was like, I don't even care where this goes. This just needs to get out and I need to spread this information because it's life-saving and life-changing. And then Amazon picked it up and that's the story.
Hmm. And it's interesting that you said that because I had a brother who passed away last year from heart disease. This is probably one of the strongest men I've ever met in my life. He was physically fit, rode his bike. I mean, this guy was just, I mean, he was a hunter as well. So,
Mm.
hunters, being a guide and stuff like that, he hiked a lot. He was in clean air, hiking in the wilderness, doing all these things. And he had a heart attack, died on his wife pulling out a bull elk.
Wow.
And one of the cardiologists on a past show that I had, she came on and she talked about, because I asked, I was like, is it hereditary? And she said, no, epigenetics. She's like, you can reverse it by your diet. So I agree with you
Wow.
about the plant-based diet and stuff like that. Um, I ain't all the way there yet. We do eat a lot of vegetables and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But we do limit our red meat. If it is red meat, it's plant based, or it's elk, it's wild game. You know what I mean? Um, but with that being said, it's very very limited, and we see the benefits from actual, um, plant based diets. You know what I mean?
That's amazing, and I do have to applaud you for your journey forward. And not everybody, I understand this as somebody who has this life-saving information and has done
Mhm.
all this research, and I literally have devoted years of my life to making this show and bringing the truth to people. I want everybody to just go in full blown 100%, but I I have compassion for people that not everybody's ready to do that, and not everybody has the information that I have. And so I want to encourage you to keep going and say that that is amazing that you're on that track. And anybody who's listening to this who's like, no, men have to eat meat, just do some research. I always say just educate yourself, keep educating yourself, and then make your decisions after you've been educated. And I have a show. I have a show to educate people, and it's called Love Gianna. It's on YouTube. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's also a podcast. So I would encourage people, men, women, children. You can have vegan pregnancies. You mentioned epigenetics. Epigenetics is what you eat affects your grandchildren, not only your children but your grandchildren. So there's doctors that I interview that have 7 children that are all vegan, and there are doctors who talk about healthy vegan pregnancies. And there is a way to do this, and that we don't need meat. There's nothing special. I asked one of the most incredible doctors. His name is T. Colin Campbell. He wrote the China study. I said, Dr. Campbell, is there something different? Is there anything in meat that's special in meat, like the protein in meat? Anything that meat can give us that plants can't? Like, what's so special about meat? He said, nothing. There's nothing in meat that plants can't give us. Even B12, they're injecting the animals with B12. B12 comes from soil. And so there's nothing in meat. There's no special protein. All plants have all 9 essential amino acids. You can get there's even protein in white potatoes. It's God gave us food from the earth, the way it looks as it comes out of the earth through plants. We are now animals. There are some animals who are carnivores and they need meat, but they have 4 paws. They walk on their paws. They walk on actually their toes, and their digestive systems are differently. They have a jaw that moves up and down rather than side to side, like grinding like we do. So
Mhm.
there, we I know that there are some animals that need to eat meat, but human beings are not one of them. And we can not only survive without it, but we can thrive and heal our disease. And it's quite profound. So I just applaud you and anybody who's listening that's on that journey. And that's amazing. Keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen the benefits. We stopped dairy.
Nice.
As soon as I stopped dairy, I mean, I tell you, because me just working, being in the military, being a lineman, very physical job. I
Yep.
had I had a lot of pain, a lot of joint pain and stuff like that. And as soon as I stopped the dairy, the inflammation stopped.
Wow. That's
Mhm.
amazing.
And I feel 100% better. My children feel better. Um, it's just it's amazing. When we had our last child, he was our pie, I think they called it. But what it was is the milk that my wife was taking was going through that protein wasn't breaking down. So when he was getting the breast milk from my wife, it was literally causing him to like have these lesions all over his body. He
Wow.
literally looked like somebody had thrown acid on him.
Oh, sweet baby.
And
Oh,
he was labeled as a failure to thrive baby. But once my wife did the research, she started changing her diet and everything, like cut the milk out completely from her diet. It all changed, and now he's in the 100 percentile. He's as big as his older brother. I mean, he's huge. You know what I
praise
mean?
God. That's amazing. And
Yeah.
see, all for getting dairy out of the diet. It's amazing.
It's crazy the way those things work.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you, okay, you being a model, a movie star, where certain looks, right, are pushed, certain body types.
Mhm.
From your perspective, how common are eating disorders amongst girls and women?
Oh, every single woman that I know has struggled with some sort of an eating disorder, fad diets, bulimia, anorexia, hating themselves, dysphoria of some sort, and it's all unnecessary. I think it's so common that not only is it important for our health, but it's important physical health to adopt a plant-based diet, but it's important for our mental health because I'll speak for myself and from my own experience. When
Mhm.
I started struggling with eating disorders throughout pretty much my entire, I'd say my entire adult life and my teen years, as soon as I could figure out like, oh, I'm becoming a woman and I'm comparing myself to XYZ and I want to look like that. As soon as I could figure that out,
Mhm.
I starved myself. I remember just eating like a marshmallow a day or something like that, or Oreo a day. And I like challenged myself. And because I have such a strong mindset, I would do it, but I was so hungry.
Hmm.
And little did I know that I could eat an abundance of food until I was full and nourished and satisfied. And not only was I full and nourished and satisfied, I'm in the best shape of my entire life. I'm 31 years old and I'm in the best shape of my entire life, mainly because of my diet. Now I work out, I do aerial acrobatics. I try to work out every day, if not every other day. I walk my dogs and and I I say that because exercise is very important, but food is more important. It is one of the most important things we can do for our physical health. And I think with comparing ourselves to other women is not going to help us either, or even other men is not going to help us. It can, I even wrote this down. I was thinking this the other day. We can either, everybody is on social media nowadays. We
Yes.
can either get envious of when we see somebody working out or who's big and jacked or who's sleek and sexy and thin. We can either get jealous and envious, or we can get inspired and motivated. So let that inspire you and motivate you, but know that you're different and you're unique and you are fearfully and wonderfully made. I had to come to that conclusion too. I had to learn that as well. I am
Hmm.
fearfully and wonderfully made. There's nobody in this world like you, David. There's nobody in this world like any of you who are listening to this right now. There has never been anybody like you, and there will never be anybody like you. And you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and you are unique. And so I think where we should remember that when
Hmm.
we are doing the best that we can do, when we're exercising, when we're taking care of ourselves, when we're eating healthy, we've adopted the whole food plant-based diet, we're on top of our game, we are us.
Hmm.
And that's enough. That's enough.
Hmm. And I think that comes from self-acceptance. You know what I mean? I was talking the other day to this man. We're talking about being able to accept our children at the home, being able to convey that message that, hey, no matter what, I accept you. Right.
Yeah.
And when we do that at the home, I think as fathers, when we instill that message to our children, it helps fight off uh the negative imagery that's out there through social media and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Because how big as a role does media actually play that you've seen? I mean, I'm sure you've seen where it's like crazy, where people's self-acceptance is really just shot down the tubes because, like you just talked about, this girl's weighing this or looking sleek and sexy, like you talked, you know what I mean? And then you
Right.
start comparing, and then what do they say? Comparison is a thief of joy, correct?
Right. 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 I think too, we can't allow, the media only has the power and influence that we give it, that we
Mhm.
allow it. There's a verse that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I think that if we have our treasure and our heart in the right places,
Mhm.
no matter who we see and what we see, it will only like eh, like bounce off of us almost. Like we can take it in. Oh wow, that's a really strong guy, or that's a really buff guy. I like it. He looks good. I'm gonna let it inspire me. Or wow, that's a really beautiful woman. Like I appreciate that, but I'm not gonna a as a man lust after her, or if I'm married, or b as a woman even lust after her or be envious of what she has, because I'm enough and I'm doing my best and I'm beautiful and I have the confidence, and my heart and my treasure is in God, and God made me who I am for a reason. I'm valuable, I'm worthwhile, I'm special.
Mhm.
So I think we only it only has the power that we allow it to have.
Mhm. And that goes back to knowing, if you know whose you are, you'll know who you are, correct?
Amen. Yep.
Hmm.
Yep.
I had a question that I want to ask you, because my teenage daughter, she's like so
Yes.
excited. She's like, "Oh my God, can I ask a question?" I was like, "Well, tell me and I'll
Cutie.
ask her," And
Yeah.
she said, "How do you overcome peer pressure as a child and later in Hollywood?"
That is a wonderful question. Please tell her I said thank you for it. Um, I think to piggyback on the last answer is that
Hmm.
we have to know, like, I'll share this story with you. I went into this casting for I think it was for like a watch or something like that. This was years ago. I was living in LA and doing my thing and hustling, going to everything that I could, never giving up on an opportunity, and or letting it pass me by, given it was legitimate and it was safe to go, and always going towards my ultimate goal. And so I went to this watch casting, and it was in one of the companies for, or the buildings for Playboy. And I was like, okay, that's a little strange. Maybe it will be in the Playboy magazine, or maybe they're associated to this somehow. I was like, I'll still go. It's for the watch brand. It's not for Playboy. Let's see what it is when we get there. So I show up, and um, they asked me to get down to my bra and underwear,
Hmm.
and I did, and I was like, man, this doesn't feel right, and I'm a Christian, and I was like, but I'm in my bra and underwear. Like I've done photo shoots in my bra and underwear before. I've modeled for lingerie companies and like done fit modeling for lingerie companies in a very classy way, and ways that I'm okay with. And I've done bikini photo shoots. Like, all right, fine. And I was thinking to myself, I looked at, there was like a mirror in the dressing room, and they were about to like get me on camera. And I was like, this isn't feeling right. this doesn't feel right. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, Gianna, I just got real with myself. And I said this in my head. I didn't say it out loud. And I said, you are the daughter of the King of Kings. That makes you a princess. That goes for
Mm,
every single woman. That goes for every single man. You're a prince. You are the son of the King of Kings. You are valuable. And I said, put your clothes back on. You're royal. You don't belong here. This is not something that is right for you. And so I put my clothes back on. I said, thank you, but no, thank you. I never went in, never did the casting. And I share that story because, like we were saying to begin with, we can have what we want. We have
mhm,
to get very clear with ourselves. What do you want and what are you willing to do for it? And that was something I wasn't willing to do. Like, this is something that I think my dad had a big hand in, is
mhm,
that I can say no. I can say
mhm,
no. You can say no to things. We don't have to say, yes, media, I'll allow you to conform my mind to this world. No, we need to be renewed by the transformation of our mind in Christ.
mhm,
And and if we keep our eyes on what Christ says about us, and this is one of the main reasons that I'm alive and thriving today, is because of the grace of God and because of my understanding about what God says about me, not what my mom says about me, not even what my dad says about me, not what my friends say about me, not anybody's opinion of me except Jesus's opinion of me. And I think the closer we get to Christ and the more understanding we have of his love for us
mhm,
and his design with who we are and his plan for our lives, I think the less we allow things that could possibly hurt us to affect us. Now, as human beings, we're relational beings. We have it ingrained in us to go along with the crowd. Like,
mhm,
there's some level, there's no judgment to anybody who goes along with the crowd, obviously. But if it's going to hurt you, if the peer pressure is something that internally in your moral compass, you say, whoa, this is wrong. This is not okay. I don't want to do this. There's always a way out.
mm,
So I think that's how I coped with it and still cope with it as an adult.
mhm. Especially in the circles that you run in over there. I can't even imagine the peer pressure, but that's awesome. And like I said, you're truly an inspiration and a role model for so many young women out there and just how you handle yourself. I mean, in a
Thank
position like
you.
that, there's so many ways that you can just compromise, and people do it all the time. They
Mhm.
start off with these small compromises,
Yep.
and it turns into this big deal to where all of a sudden you don't like who you've become,
Yep.
and I see that in work with work related issues where all of a sudden you compromised here, you cut this corner here, and you got away with it, and it continues to go. And the next thing you know, you're dying and your
Right.
family's left without a father, a provider, a protector. You know what I mean? It's the
Yep.
same thing in life, when we start compromising our integrity, our character, and that's something that we need to teach our children. Don't compromise on these little things because they turn into bigger things later on.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, there are things that are going to be challenging. There are things
Mhm.
where you can just sit on your couch and God will bless you. Somebody will come to your door and give you whatever you need. There are moments like that. God is a big God. He can do anything, anytime. And there are some times where things are going to be challenging. And
Mhm.
if we don't act on them and we don't do what we know in our heart is the right thing to do, they're going to be even more challenging if we don't do them.
Mm, absolutely. And it's an everyday, for me, it's an everyday struggle, to do the right thing, to wake up and do the things that I don't want to do, right?
Hmm.
We heard it, you talked a lot about the Bible and stuff like that. Well, look at the scriptures where Paul says, man, I'm a man like you guys, and guess what? I sometimes don't do the things I want to do, and the things that I don't want to do, I wind up doing, but
Exactly.
thanks be to God, who
Right.
gives you that grace. Um, I think a lot of times too, as fathers, and I just want to once again give your dad credit for this, is because it seems like he taught you boundaries. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned with my daughter is teaching those healthy boundaries, teaching our daughters that they can say no.
Mm-hmm.
especially in the world today where you got these guys who push, 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 and they think no means yes,
Right.
and I mean, we laugh, but I mean, it's true. I mean, how many
Yeah.
times does that happen? You know what I mean? Where these girls get themselves in these predicaments where this guy will push, 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 and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
they play those mind games to where, hey, now this girl thinks that she's obligated to do something. And I tell you what, I don't want that happening to my daughter.
Oh, no,
Because
no, I don't want that to happen to any woman, any girl.
exactly, because
Yeah.
being a father, I know a head will roll, and
Yeah.
I don't want to see that. And I don't want to go through that. So I think it's important as fathers that we teach these good boundaries, these healthy boundaries. One last thing, Gianna, before we get off of
Yes.
here,
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, what are some of the signs that a father can look for in his children that might be struggling with an eating disorder, if you don't mind?
Yes. And there's something that's on my heart to just a comment that you mentioned in the last thing that I think it's a lot of women approach relationships, and especially sexually intimate relationships, as a means for love. And so I want to encourage any young women listening to this that if you want to see how much a man loves you, tell him no. and
Mm,
and and save that for your husband, because your husband is out there and your husband will wait. And the man that God has sent to you, he will respect you and love you regardless of whether he can have you sexually or not. And same with women, for men too. Like, men, wait, you are sacred, you are a prince, you are meant for one woman. And that's a beautiful special gift to be able to give to your partner, and to say, I waited for you and I didn't even cheat on you before I knew you. And now you can trust me in our marriage, that not only did I not do this before I met you, but I waited for you, and I'm not going to do it in the marriage. So anyway,
mm,
so to go back to how can fathers help with the eating disorders for their children, what they can spot and everything, and how they can help them with that. I think they don't shame anybody. I never want to shame anybody. Shame doesn't get us anywhere. It gets
mm,
people further into a disorder, or further into anger or self-sabotage. And I'd say stay away from shame. If the person or the young girl, or even some young men, struggle with eating disorders, don't make them talk about it if they don't want to talk about it. My dad was so great at this. He was like, Gianna, if you ever want to get high, let's do it together. And then
mm,
it made it less um, appetizing. I didn't
mm,
really care about it anymore. And so I think if a father can say, you're so beautiful, that not only do I think you're beautiful, God made you beautiful. God thinks you're beautiful. If God had social media, he would like every single one of your pictures and comment on every single one of your pictures. He thinks you are amazing, and I think you're amazing. And he knows the plans he has for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope in a future. That if you're struggling with this, because it's not, eating disorders aren't just about one thing. There's always an underlying need or issue that
mm,
this disorder is trying to solve. That fathers know that there's a need, and
mm,
ask them if you can help them with their need that they're trying to meet on their own, through a disordered way, through a
mm,
way that's not helping them, that's not meeting their need. Maybe it's meeting their need, but like I said, it's through self-sabotage or hurting yourself. But there's a way to meet that need through loving yourself, through loving them, and having them learn to love themselves. So I would encourage that, fathers, just not shame, not judge, talk about it when they're ready to talk about, know that it might take some time, and to reassure them and to encourage them that they are special and unique, and they can do anything that they put their mind to, and that you believe in them with.
mm.
They can do anything with belief, with encouragement, with love, support, and safety. Dads provide safety and protection. Let them know that they're safe. They're safe even in the admission that they may have an eating disorder. They're safe, that you won't judge them, and that you can get through it together. And I can almost guarantee that slowly but surely that person will be helped.
I like that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Gianna. Um, thank you so much for coming on here and just sharing your wisdom, just being able to open up to us about your wonderful life. Um, You're truly an inspiration. Like I said, you're amazing. And
Thank you.
I
Right back
just,
at you.
I just thank you for what you're doing. It takes a courageous person, especially in Hollywood, to do the things that you do and to not compromise on your integrity. I mean,
Thank you.
that's amazing. Once again, though, can you tell our audience if they want to follow you, if they want to get a hold of you, how they can get a hold of you, and just share with our audience real quick, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. Sure. Happy to. So, YouTube, I mentioned YouTube. You can just type in my name, Gianna Simone, or Love Gianna. On Instagram, it's at G Simone. And Twitter is at Gianna Simone, and or Gianna Simone 1 on Twitter. And if anybody wants to get a hold of me, they can go on my website. There's a contact page, or I try my best to check my direct messages on Instagram. I'm on Instagram quite a bit. I'd say that's the platform that I really enjoy being on. So sometimes I get flooded with some direct messages, but I always try to get back to them at least once a week. So if somebody wants to get in touch with me, my website or Instagram, but you can follow me on Twitter or follow along on YouTube.
Awesome. Once again, thank you so much for coming on here, Gianna. We appreciate you, and we look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.